Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to a special transmission in which we will be highlighting our Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit to Russia. This is the first official visit by any head of the Republic in 23 years, and of course this is on the invitation of Vladimir Putin. Pakistan and Russia enjoy a host of bilateral relations. Under the current scenario, there's a lot of things that both the countries can jointly work upon. There are a lot of issues that both the countries can jointly also work towards, and can also forge a stronger unity, a stronger collaboration, a stronger friendship, a stronger cooperation between each other. There have been a different kind of politics in the past, and our Prime Minister has been highlighting that he does not want to be part of any bloc politics. At the same time, he wants to further and relationships between countries that are present in the region, and that is the main intention of the Pakistani government. That is the main intention of our Prime Minister Imran Khan. Also, he wants peace in the region, something that he has been reiterating since a long time, and also in the latest interviews that he has given, he has talked about Pakistan wanting to be that instrument of peace between the different countries or the factions that have issues between each other. That is the role Pakistan wants to have. That is the role Pakistan is going to highlight also during the visit to Russia. We've been joined by two important guests in the studio during this hour. Let me introduce them to you one by one. Ambassador Durrani joins us on the right. He is a former Asif Durrani sahab joins us on the right. He's a former ambassador, and we've been talking to him for a long time on different issues of foreign affairs. Thank you very much, Durrani sahab, to have joined us. And our second guest is Yasir Janjua. He's a defense analyst. Yasir, we talked yesterday as well, and today you're back to talk about Russia, to talk about Pak-Russia relations. Let's begin with Asif Durrani sahab. Asif Durrani sahab, diplomacy has different virtues, different values, different repercussions, different angles to it. Pakistan and Russia are two countries who are trying to forge that relationship, that diplomacy between each other. How important is Prime Minister Imran Khan's visit in the current scenario to Russia?
Well, from bilateral point of view, it was already a predetermined visit months ago, and much before the Ukrainian crisis had erupted. So for that, if we want to look at it from the Ukrainian lens, then we will see a different picture. But when you look at it from the bilateral perspective, then the picture would be different. And in that respect, already Prime Minister Imran Khan has had very good chemistry with President Putin. And they have been meeting frequently on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And they have been exchanging views on telephone. The most recent, in fact, the visit which now this visit is taking place, actually it is a sequel to the Twitter exchanges on Islamophobia. And then came the formal offer from President Putin. So that shows a frankness which has in fact been now the hallmark of bilateral relationship between Russia and Pakistan at the highest level.
What about this time? How important is this visit?
Now, coming to the Ukrainian crisis, and if you look at it, so in any case, the bilateral visits, they in fact, depending, and this also shows the level of confidence Pakistan and Russia have in their bilateral relationship, which is taking place. Pakistan cannot take sides, which Prime Minister has made it very clear. In fact, we should be, in fact, a factor of stability as far as these warring parties or factions are concerned. We can, we should not offer ourselves, but we can also play a balancer's role or a moderator's role. That is also a possibility. But how it will have, I will not dwell into it right now. It would be premature. But there have been different voices regarding Prime Minister's visit. I don't subscribe to that, because being a sovereign state, Prime Minister is going to Russia, and we have to look at our own interests, and those interests in fact lie in coming closer, warming up of our relationship, especially in the field of in economic exchanges, trade relationship, defense relationship, scientific cooperation, which is already going on. So these are the issues where I think there is a need to further galvanize it, and I think Prime Minister's visit is going to contribute towards
All
that.
right. Pakistan's visit will contribute to a lot of factors that affect both the nations and further forge and further strengthen the diplomacy and the different ties between the two nations. Yasir, when it comes to defense, we know that Russia has good relations and has a defense relationship with India as well. Do you feel this visit could also pave the way for maybe some kind of a stronger defense related relationship between Russia and Pakistan? Do you feel Russia is inclined towards also that angle of forging relations with Pakistan?
Umar, India and Russia have very, very strong defense relationships. Russia has been a major supplier of defense products to India for decades now. Although Pakistan has been buying defense products from Russia, sometimes through third countries. For example, the Mi-17 helicopters, we do buy them, but we are not buyers of numbers of those helicopters as India is, and then other products as well. However, there is a likelihood that Russia, at this particular moment, when India is playing its game that it's buying from Russia as well and it's going into the American bloc as well, so the Russians also would have to think wisely. Although in the past, Russians have been careful because India was a major customer, so they would not want to ignite those feelings in India, and they were resistant. But that was a time of Cold War. The first 43 years of our existence, we were actually, let's be honest, we were the enemies of USSR. We played a major role in the breakup of USSR. If somebody may like it or not, that's a reality. We became a weapon or a tool, but we did.
But you know, the Russians changed.
That's exactly what it is. Times have changed now. Russia has come a long way. Pakistan has come a long way. Pakistan has seen that the Americans are not the Americans that were before. So Pakistan is also weighing his options, and Russians are going to weigh their options. However, I am not going to see any quantum leap of Russians tilting towards Pakistan and giving up India.
I'm not asking of a quantum leap, I'm asking of some kind of a strengthening of
there will be. And there are a couple of things on the table that obviously we can't talk about here in the defense related matters that already are being discussed between the two countries. Having said that, moreover, more than the defense, it is very significant for Pakistan that Russia and Pakistan are coming close when India was trying to give impression that Pakistan has become irrelevant. So our geopolitical importance has been highlighted once again.
True.
We are becoming a pivot in the region, and Russia realizes that. That's why they've invited us. As the worthy ambassador was also saying, actually President Putin was to come to Pakistan. It has been ongoing for last many months now, but because of COVID, that didn't happen. So now the last both the leaders met in Beijing on the Winter Olympics, and that's where this resolve to strengthen relations came up, and very soon after that visit, this is coming up. Although the timing, but for us, this is actually very important. We are giving actually a message to the Americans that we are not completely reliant on you. If you think you're going to dump us and we'll have nowhere to go, we have options and we have friends. And in politics, there are no permanent friends, you know.
The enemies there are no permanent enemies either.
Yeah.
Speaking of enmity and friendship, Pakistan has said, and our Premier has said time and again, that Pakistan does not want to be part of any bloc politics. Rather, it wants to forge equal relationship with all the neighbors, and it would also want to be that instrument of peace between the warring factions. Dr. Salma Malik, foreign affairs expert, joins us here in the studios as well. Dr. Saiba, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saiba, Pakistan being a pivot nation now, this is what everybody is saying since quite some time. Now that all eyes are on Pakistan as well, with this visit of our Premier to Russia, what should be expected of Pakistan and what should be expected of the gamut of relationship between our two countries?
To start with, thank you so much, Omar, for having me over. Few things that we need to really keep in mind is that this is actually a very strong defining moment for us. I mean, we do keep saying that at every threshold of international politics, we say that this is a defining moment. But for Pakistan, this definitely is one, because we are trying to come out of the bloc politics, and we are trying to have a policy which is as wholesome, as comprehensive as possible that it could be. And as a result of that, what we really need to see here is that Pakistan, how it plays, this shift from strategic to geoeconomics, and with this shift happening, how well are we going to play our cards, how well are we going to work with our friends, if one may take this term in international politics. And when we say friends, what technically we mean is that those partners in our geoeconomic game that are going to help us forward this particular action through mutual cooperation, as well as having a relationship which is going to be productive for both sides. I mean, in geostrategic, what one would always say is that in geostrategic, we are looking at ways to curtail other countries and other powers' rule, action, and the space to maneuver. But in geoeconomics, it's technically a situation where everyone is helping each other forge better geoeconomic terms, better economy for one another. And if Pakistan can actually capitalize on this moment, it is going to go very well, not only in terms of economics, but also diplomacy for us and for any of our partners who are going to partner with us in this particular game.
All right. Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab, the Foreign Office has identified Afghanistan and Islamophobia as two of the important topics that are going to be discussed during the visit of our Premier to Russia. How do you foresee Afghanistan as being one of the issues? Of course, we know about the humanitarian crisis, we know about the economic crisis that Afghanistan is facing currently. We also know that the money has yet to reach Afghanistan as we speak. Do you feel both the countries together can exert sufficient pressure on other organizations, maybe, or countries, or maybe work together in order to fund or send some kind of funds to Afghanistan before it's too late?
I think there is already an understanding between Pakistan and Russia as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Both are members of the Troika Plus, in which United States and China are there. And then at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization level, Afghanistan was discussed. On the sidelines of the Dushanbe meeting in November last year, it was decided by all the immediate 6 neighbors of Afghanistan that they will recognize the regime in Kabul simultaneously. Of course, Russia also had the consent in that, being the 7th country. So this is so much about Afghanistan. Humanitarian crisis is Russia is on board in demanding the US to unfreeze the Afghan assets, which Pakistan also subscribed, and in fact all other neighbors and even some European countries have been demanding unfreezing of Afghan assets. And with regard to humanitarian aid delivery, that's a big problem, and the problem emerges when the banks in Afghanistan are unable to deliver.
Of course. And
that here again, Russian Foreign Office statement is very clear. It's a special envoy on Afghanistan, Zamir Kabulov. He is on record saying that you are in fact allowing dissent in Afghanistan to breed. You are allowing those Al-Qaeda and other people to
regroup,
to not only to regroup, but in fact to fan their message of discontent among.
All right. Now, speaking of discontent, Yasir Saab, discontent is quite apparent as far as our not so friendly neighbor India is concerned. As soon as a visit was announced, all the Indian media went on fire about, all eyes are on Pakistan, all eyes are on this, and trying to put Pakistan in a rather negative light as well. In this presence of a scenario in which there is a spoiler known as India, and the fact that Russia has strong relationship with India, how can Pakistan counter that spoiler effect of India, and B, make Russia understand that it can have a balanced relationship with both India and Pakistan?
See, as I said, the growing isolation for Russians in the West is forcing the Russians to realign their sides as well. Now, Russians will be naive to miss this opportunity of getting this bloc, the Islamic bloc, so-called Islamic bloc, on their side when the West is turning against them. So I think Russians will be, and President Putin and the Russian government has been very smart, and they've been playing their cards very smartly. We're not going to go into the details of what is going on between them and Ukraine. That's their internal matter.
Of course.
So we are not involved with it. We are going. Prime Minister Imran Khan has made it very clear. And even the Ukrainians demanded us that now that we are going there, we should press upon the Russians about this issue. But I'm sure the Prime Minister will not involve in this, because
that we will wait to see.
Because otherwise, one can always say that, okay, we have a problem at home, then why have the Ukrainians or the rest of the Europeans or the Americans have not?
Where does that leave India, Yasir Saab?
I think Indians are in a state of shock. They never expected Russians to come close to Pakistan, because they thought, oh, whatever we do, Russians will never come to Pakistan. And that is happening. And there's the most the Russians will achieve from this is the energy corridor. And they've got a lot of gas and oil reserves. So they're likely to capitalize on them, the entire Central Asian states. Why would the Russians want to miss this opportunity, especially when they have sanctions now being placed on them by major Western countries?
Speaking of sanctions, Dr. Salma, we know that the West has put a lot of sanctions, and a lot of countries are putting sanctions, which paves the, which makes me want to talk about, this whole gas pipeline between Pakistan and Russia that is not, taking real effect because of this US sanction as well. Do you feel there is some kind of a parallel window for both the countries to work on their energy contribution, or their energy cooperation, or some kind of a gas or oil pipeline between the two countries in the future if this situation persists?
Well, it's going to be very difficult, because one thing that the US is targeting, and rather the West is targeting, both in terms of Pakistan as well as Russia and other countries related to it, is primarily to sanction not only Iran. There have already been talks about, especially when the US withdrawal from Afghanistan was taking place, there were rumors about having pro-democracy and 9/11 related sanctions on Pakistan as well. So the US would ideally want, and of course the Indian lobby is going to really work hard to have sanctions or any kind of issues pressed on Pakistan to make the situation more financially difficult for us. But as the Prime Minister has also said, that we need to not only keep on working on whatever available corridors that we have, we also need to see as to whatever areas of cooperation that go with it. But at the same time, of course, there is also the CPEC that is keeping Pakistan in the negative US or the Western limelight. But having all of these problems at parallel with each other, what Pakistan can do and what Russia can do is that we keep on exploring whatever opportunity, however less that opportunity that may come to our hand, and see what is feasible, how it works, and keep moving in this direction. And I'm pretty sure the Western corridors can also not ignore Pakistan or Russia in the longer run, because this is going to create a massive fiasco for a lot of other partner countries that are going to be part of this larger picture. But in terms of bilateral Russian and Pakistani energy pipelines, I think we need to keep working in whatever smaller windows, bigger chunks that are afforded to us, and capitalize as much as possible on that. And a lot of that depends on good, solid diplomacy that Pakistan really needs to work very, very critically upon.
All right, that's a very good one. I'll take back to our former ambassador. Good, solid diplomacy, Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab. What are the avenues in your point of view? You understand the region much better than a lot of us do, about the avenues of cooperation that Pakistan and Russia could explore. We know about Islamophobia, we know of Afghanistan, we know of the energy cooperation, we have talked about defense. Are there other avenues that we could work together upon?
When you talk about solid diplomacy, then it's not only Russia-Pakistan relationship. Look at the region, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization,
of course,
is in a quasi form, is emerging. That bloc, it may not, it may be early, too early to say that, but you can say that there are certain sketches which have been drawn, and how to shape up things in the coming future. From Pakistan's perspective, for long, since our independence, and because of certain valid reasons, we joined the American camp. Again, the problem was national security, where we could not compromise. So we joined the blocs, CETO or CENTRO, and we became the allies of the Americans.
Of course.
But after 75 years of experience and many shocks as well as losses, I think there is a realization in Pakistan now that it's better to have a strong regional policy whereby you are in peace within and without, and that in fact is rather much better and a solid and stable guarantee for your national security as well as for your prosperity. So if you are in peace in the neighborhood, for instance, Afghanistan, now for us the second front theoretically is over because India is out. Of course, it may not be down, but they are out. But at the same time, Shanghai Cooperation Organization also gives a glimmer of hope. India is part
future of the regional
India is part of it. So India cannot part its ways despite the fact that they are flirting with the Americans.
India is also part of SAARC, to be very fair.
No, but the SAARC is a non-starter. To tell you the truth, SAARC is a non-starter because we were unable, both India and Pakistan, to put aside their issues on the back burner like the ASEAN did, like Indonesia and Malaysia did. So we failed, and that's why it could not take off. But here we need much bigger partners like China and Russia who are steering Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Pakistan and India are the members. But let me repeat, it is too early to say.
Of course,
but from Pakistan's
only time will tell.
But from Pakistan's perspective, if our western borders are safe, if our economy with China, Russia and Central Asian states, if we can do, India is most welcome to join, but the question is, these are the sketches you have.
Of course,
we have to build on that.
Exactly, and we need to build on them very quickly and very firmly. Yasir, both Pakistan and Russia are quite worried about the situation in Afghanistan and the repercussions of it, especially when it comes to instability and giving rise to terrorist groups. That also has been highlighted by certain countries very, very recently. We could have security challenges, direct and indirect, because of that. What aspects do you feel both Pakistan and Russia could work upon jointly in order to thwart such attempts?
Right, as you already pointed out yourself, right now the biggest problem in Afghanistan is the money. They don't have access to the funds. Americans have frozen their funds. So I think Pakistan and Russia, along with China and a couple of other countries, can work on the rebuilding of Afghanistan and the financial stability, because everything comes with financial stability. Look, nobody has yet been on the path of accepting the Afghanistan
government. But yes, the fact is, as far as financial stability is concerned, it looks as if it is going to take some time, because the pledges have been made, but the money hasn't yet reached Afghanistan. And to all the people I've talked recently, this is what they are saying, that it will reach. When it will reach, this is the whole question. So what happens in the middle of it?
So to thwart that looming crisis, pumping of money into Afghanistan for basic necessities for the poor Afghan people is what the Pakistanis and the Russians can work jointly. And Russians will need the Pakistanis. We are sitting next door and we have some very good relationships with Taliban. So Russia would be keen. And Russia, obviously, this void created, the vacuum created after the departure of Americans, Russia would certainly, like the Chinese, the Russia would be certainly keen to become relevant in Afghanistan, have some say in the Afghan matters, because it's in the neighborhood. So Pakistan and Russia can work very closely on the Afghan rebuilding or support for Afghanistan, because that support for Afghanistan actually helps Pakistan as well. Because if there is relative peace there, Pakistan doesn't have to worry about anything coming towards our side. So that's why this is the main agenda point on the Prime Minister's list of things to do or talk to President Putin, Afghanistan. Because there is a need to fix that problem. Although nobody has yet recognized the Afghan government, and there is no likelihood of that happening in the very near foreseeable future. However, the money needs to go to the people.
All right. Dr. Salma Malik, the money needs to go to the people. Do you feel that the money is going to reach as has been pledged in due time? And if it doesn't, and if it does give rise to, as per the aspersion or as per the question marks that have been raised by different quarters about the terrorist elements that are going to resurge, surge into Afghanistan. Where does that leave the regional situation, and how can Pakistan and Russia work together in order to work against such elements? China has already talked about the ETIM. Russia has also said, a couple of months back, and had even put troops on some side so that elements do not enter the Russian territories. How do you foresee all of that? Because on the one hand, we have Afghanistan, on the other hand, we have the regional crisis that is also emerging in Ukraine.
Right. Thank you. Actually, you see that the issue is, number one, how does the money reach? The biggest joke that has happened from the US side is where they said, we are going to release the money, but half of it is going to go for the rehab of the effectees of 9/11. So, I mean, this is not how you provide money to people, their own money to the people who require that money and who are desperate for that money. And still you raise noise about women liberation, health, education, security, social security. And all
how can you have all of that if you don't have money,
exactly.
if you don't have money to stabilize
and
the
even
government?
if you think that you're going to release that money, not only do you make it conditional, but you also make it 1/4 the size that it was supposed to be delivered to the people. So I think one avenue, as both the speakers prior to me have pointed out, of course, is that Pakistan and Russia can work hand in glove with one another in helping, identifying and prioritizing with the interim Afghan regime as to what are the requirements, the dire requirements on the priority list of the Afghan regime, from at the very basic to the most immediate as to what is required. And once that is done, regular interventions can be managed in that direction. So all of those areas which require attention can be given that due course of attention, as well as the type of money that is required. Perhaps in certain areas, say the health sector or the education sector, except for the salaries of the health workers as well as educators, you require books, you require food ration, you require medicines. So it can be both cash and kind of a mix that works in this capacity. But having said that, of course, there's a lot of need for a monetary injection, and the sooner it happens, the better it is. Will it reach the people? That entirely depends on the will and the power of the interim Afghan government. They want to remain in power. They want to remain a stable force. They want to have stability around them, and they also know that there are several elements who are hell-bent on destabilizing them, and one should not actually forego this notion that many of these elements who are now operating in Afghanistan may not be autonomous agents. They may have very strong support and proxy backing from those regional powers who have been in direct contact with the Taliban.
Proxy powers, Dr. Salma, is something that's very important. That is what is giving rise to a lot of instability in the region as well. And this is how the whole regional politics is playing as we speak. A lot of changes are happening, and you know all about that. Ambassador Asif, Durrani sahab, regional politics and proxy wars and hybrid wars, we have been hearing them, we've been seeing them directly and indirectly as well. And under this regional scenario that we are confronted with, we see a lot of that. And the aim is to destabilize countries like Pakistan, that, as you yourself have said in the beginning of the show, is a pivot country. What needs to be done by both countries? Well, here I'm talking of Pakistan and Russia.
Here, it's quite clear. I mean, the agenda is clear in my view, and the two countries came together on initially on this terrorism issue, and then they have also had cooperation on narcotics, which was again quite a source of concern for both Pakistan and Russia, and now it is more strategic. And with the strengthening of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this cooperation is gaining ground. And then into it, right now we have not discussed Iran yet. We have not discussed Turkey yet.
Of course.
So it is just not that it would be just Russia standing all alone or China standing all alone. No, I think that's why this region is emerging. And
there are spoilers that do not want this region to emerge.
Those spoilers, I think they would be isolated if they are in the region. But if they are spoilers,
one major.
They cannot tilt the balance. It's the question. They are one of the members, And then the outside spoilers, in fact, they have tried their best. They failed. For instance, United States tried its best to keep its troops in Afghanistan. It failed. In the region, now what United States is, what steps they have taken, for instance, in the banking sector and all that, they are squeezing the Afghans. It's in a way a reprisal they have resorted
But even the $3.5 billion that they talk about, Ambassador Saab, have
that's
yet to
nonsensical. The reason is United States, in fact, it is denting its own credibility. Reason being that this money which they, on the pretext that it would be given to the victims of 9/11 is nonsensical, because none of the Afghan was involved in 9/11. Secondly, those who were involved, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and all that, despite the lapse of 2 decades, the cases have not started yet. No one has been convicted yet on 9/11 charges. So what are we talking about? So here United States, I think, they indulge in bad politics, and in the bad politics they have gone so deeper that in fact they are losing the sense of sanity in international relations. And United States is making a mockery of the multilateralism, which is why
there are other nations that are backing the United States. In its
no,
endeavors.
but the reason is it's the scare. It is the intransigence. Otherwise, for instance, none of the signatories of nuclear deal called Joint Comprehensive Program of Action, no one has ever supported the US's contention when it withdrew. So this is a sheer intransigence.
All right.
So, and that is why I think now you find dissenting voices here and there, and they are gaining momentum.
All right. Yasir, the security advisors of both Pakistan and Russia held wide-ranging talks in December last year. Now both sides felt at that time also it was a step in the strengthening of bilateral relations. Then Moeed Yusuf Saab is also accompanying our Prime Minister. We have taken out a national security policy of late. Do you feel both Russia and Pakistan can learn from each other as far as security perspectives and how to move forward under the security dynamics of the region?
Oh, there's a great deal of learning on both sides. And by the way, nobody could imagine 30 years ago that Pakistan and Russia will hold joint military exercises.
True.
So this is a long, long way that we have come. We've held joint military exercises. That's a great achievement. True. And Indians are obviously not happy about it. Surely the Americans are not happy about it. The Brits are not happy about it. So we have a lot to learn from each other, and Russians per se are very keen on learning from our experience in the war on terror in the last 20 years, what we have done and stabilized our western part. They have a lot to learn from us, and obviously they know that what we did in the 80s and the 90s also, or the 80s, they must have learnt a lot from what Pakistan has been able to achieve. So Pakistan's importance cannot be underestimated, and Russians have realized that this is a very important country. And by the way, it's just not CPEC. It's actually the BRI, the great design of China is BRI, and Russia is part of the BRI, and Pakistan will gain a lot from BRI. So we learn a lot from each other. Purely from defense point of view, Russians would be very keen to talk to us, and in economics or in energy, let's say, it's to be seen what is announced in this visit. If it's not, probably when President Putin comes in, we are listening about refineries and a couple of other things. But from the learning curve point of view, yes, there is on both sides. Because we have learnt some very hard lessons by being on the American allies side, that they did not come to our rescue or to our support when there was need. Maybe Russia turns out to be a better friend, and we are not still talking about becoming part of any bloc. We keep our options open, like the Indians are doing. Why not us? And Russians should be smart. We are 220 million people.
All right.
Why would the Russians want to lose such a big opportunity?
Interesting aspect, Dr. Salma, Malik. Learning block. When we talk of learning blocks and we talk about bilateral relationships, we talk about increasing cooperation, collaboration, we've talked about defense, we've talked about politics, we've talked about terrorism, we've talked about security. Economy is also one of the huge aspects of cooperation between any two countries. How important do you feel is the current economic or trade relationship between Pakistan and Russia, and what avenues in your point of view, could both the countries work on to further strengthen it?
I think economy is the main driving force at the moment, because as I earlier said, that this gradual shift from geostrategic or geopolitical to geoeconomics, technically it's a different name to the same game that we are all playing. But the fact is that the thrust now is, or the priority that we are placing now is on the economic relations. Okay. And this entire North-South corridor that we are talking about, the BRI, CPEC, any of the bilateral agreements having closer relations with each other, specifically in this time frame, is very important because the entire world is facing immense recession. There's a lot of problem, even greater powers are feeling. The US, when it pulled out of Afghanistan, however reluctantly it may be, was also for the fact that it could no longer, despite having so many allies, support long wars, and they had to pull out. So this is how the dynamics, global dynamics have been. And for Russia to realize that quoting Pakistan, having better relations with Pakistan is very important. I mean, the messages were there loud and clear even after the Cold War ended, and we tried to patch up relations, but it was always India that remained predominant over the relationship, kind of the binary that we tried to develop. So there was always a third factor to that binary. But here now what Russia has very prudently realized is that Pakistan is gradually, with the CPEC and the BRI, gaining on the economic front, and we are gaining a direction. And if we, if they board the same bus, it is going to be quite beneficial for all involved in the game. And as I said, that in economics, it's more than a competition, it is more of a cooperative relationship that works and helps every stakeholder develop far better than they were in the initial instance. True. So that is going to be very beneficial. But at the same time, I would also like to just mention here is that we did have a brief honeymoon with the Soviet Union, not Russian Federation, in the 1950s and 60s. And one may recall that the type of investments that Soviet Union at that time did with Pakistan was the steel mills or certain other flagship projects which actually helped Pakistan develop its economic infrastructure, industrial infrastructure. So in contrast to the US, Russian or the Soviet bloc countries at that time were deeply invested in infrastructural development of the states, which would actually go a long run in sustaining countries such as Pakistan become solid and become much more viable in the coming decades than having one-time aid or trade injections that are part and parcel of the Western capitalist mindset.
There needs to be a consistency, you know.
So there has to be a consistency. We both need to realize that this is a moment that we need to capitalize as much as possible, and whatever avenues that we can explore, whether it's on the energy sector, it is on the development sector, counterterrorism, governance, we need to build as many bridges as possible.
That is so true, as many bridges as possible, and that is, I think, the intention of our Prime Minister when he goes to Russia. Very quick question, last question to all three of you. Let's begin with Ambassador Saab. We've discussed more or less the whole gamut of relationship that could be explored upon. What, in your point of view, does Pakistan gain from this visit, and what does Russia gain from this visit? Your take.
I think it's a building blocks. We are in fact warming up to each other. Nothing concrete has come out yet. But yes, there are also, for instance, north-south gas stream pipeline with Russia is around $2 billion. That is there. So economic content is going to add more meat to the relationship and warmth. So, but at the same time, I'm more enthusiastic looking from the bigger picture.
All right.
And that is the overall geostrategic paradigm which is going to come up in the near future.
And that is going to strengthen as far as this visit is concerned. Yasir Saab, what's your take?
I think I'll pick up from where the ambassadors have left. It's going to be a paradigm shift in Pakistan's position and a very clear message to the Americans. Look, we are not reliant and dependent on you. We have other friends as well. So that message will in turn give us fruits in times to come. But that message had to be sent to the Americans. the way they left us high and dry in the middle of it is something that we had to counter. And the Russians have come at a very right time.
All right. The Russians have come at a very right time. Consistency, Dr. Saiba. Should we look forward for that consistency as far as this visit is concerned?
That's the name of the game. But I would also say that we don't need to become too euphoric about the relations. Although it's not correct to say, it's too early to state that. But as the main point is consistency. Second, a lot of prudent diplomacy at all fronts, at multi-tracks. And unfortunately, having a multi-track diplomatic circuit has not been Pakistan's very, very strong point, if I may afford to be critical on this aspect. But at the same time, we are not picking sides. We are having more options open and available to us. So, and I think the message that should go out is that we are not actually going for a new bloc or anything. We are garnering more friends and more support for ourselves. And this thing is going to become better if we also have a good, solid economic DNA in Pakistan that can help forge this sustained relationship to a much larger and longer term than we can possibly perceive at this moment.
That is wonderful, and I think there could be a better statement while ending this transmission. Thank you very much to all three of my guests, Ambassador Asif Durrani Saab, Yasir Janjua Saab, and Dr. Salma Malik Sahiba, to have joined us for this very important discussion on the on this visit of our Prime Minister Imran Khan to Russia. It's a 2-day official visit. It's a very important visit, and as my guests have elaborated during the course of this hour, that there are so many aspects to this visit and to this relationship that will be explored, that need to be explored in the whole geostrategic environment that the whole region is engulfed in. And we really hope, and all, as the whole world is saying, the media outlets are saying, all eyes are on Pakistan. We wish Pakistan and its leadership all the very best for this visit. Allah Hafiz.